Good afternoon again. Welcome to the Fairwinds Lecture. I'm your hostess today. My name's Emily. On behalf of Fairwinds Foundation, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this event. The Fairwinds Lecture, titled The Prospect of Inter-Korea Relations and the East Asia Peace, which will be given by Dr. Moon. And now, let us welcome the chairman of Fairwinds Foundation, Chairman Zhang, to give us some words.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fairwind Lecture. The mission of the Fairwind Foundation is to promote civic culture and to help our Taiwanese young leaders to connect with the world. So in order to achieve that goal, we organize many events every year, such as lectures, seminar, exchange program, and the public policy analysis, and some released reporters. Today, we are very, very honored to have a distinguished speaker from South Korea, Professor Moon Chong-in, to speak for us on the issue of international security of the Korean Peninsula. And I'm very grateful that Professor朱云汉from the Institute of Political Science, Academic Sinica, to help organize and monitor the lecture. So I would like to shift the microphone to Professor朱云汉. He will introduce our speaker today for us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, and ladies and gentlemen. It is truly my honor and privilege to moderate this afternoon's lecture by Professor Moon Chong-in. He has accomplished so much during his career. It probably requires 30 minutes for a proper introduction, but I try to be brief. Well, first of all, he is a world-renowned international relations scholar. His work has been widely read and cited and respected by the global academic community. He was awarded the title of Distinguished University Professor by Yonsei University recently to recognize his more than a quarter-century contribution and devotion to education, to research at this premier university in South Korea. And he was also the former dean of the Graduate School of International Study of Yonsei. And also he has published more than 30 books and volumes and more than 250 journal articles. His publication not only is influential among the academic community, but also around the world among the policy circle. He's a contributor to foreign affairs and many other very important magazines that have been widely read by the world leader and the policy elite around the world. He's also now the editor-in-chief of Global Asia. Actually, he's a founder, of this very important, very influential, policy-oriented magazine. I believe that, right now, this important political commentary and magazine is also, probably just as influential as foreign affairs in the region. He also played a very important role over the last quarter century. He's widely recognized as the principal architect of President Kim Dae-jung's Sunshine Policy. You know how important that is. Because this is also the most important legacy President Kim Dae-jung have left with his office. And since then, he also has been a key advisor to President Roman Hine, and more recently to President Moon Jae-in. So, he has been a strong advocate for engagement, and also, I think he has always, given very important advice and guidance to the top leader in South Korea, especially among the president coming from the progressive camp. So I think, we are very lucky to have him today to share his wisdom and insight with us over inter-Korea relationship. And we all know that cross-strait relation and inter-Korea relation has been intertwined, for the last 100 years. And I cannot think of any other Korean scholar who carry more authority, command more respect, and possess more insight than Professor Moon Jae-in does. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Moon Jae-in.
Yunan, thank you very much for your wonderful introduction. And Chairman Zhang, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'm here as just, professor, because Yunan invited me to come over here. And therefore, my talks will represent my own view, not for the government. And we have Ambassador Kang Hyung-hoon, Ambassador Kang from ROK Embassy here. Let us give a big applause to our ambassador. In fact, he was the Director General for Southeast Asia and Oceania, and therefore I used to work with him when he took care of southern part of Asia. And I will give just 30 to 40-minute talks on what's going on in Korea, and I'll be talking about President Moon Jae-in's policy on inter-Korean relations and the North Korean nuclear issue. And then I wanted to have more questions and comments from you rather than spending all my time, just 1 hour and 1 hour and 30 minutes is not, adequate. President Moon Jae-in was inaugurated on May 9th, 2017. He was bombarded with all kinds of military provocation by North Korea. Okay. North Korea undertook 15 ballistic missile testing, including ICBM, on November 29th. And also, North Korea undertook a 6th nuclear testing on September 3rd, 2017. Its explosive power was about 10 times more than the atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima, 150 kiloton. The American atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima was 15 kiloton. 15 kiloton killed almost 100,000 people. Therefore, when you talk about 150 kiloton, that means what it can destroy 1 million population. But what was equally worrisome was that the American attitude to North Korea. In 2017, President Trump's policy on North Korea was characterized by fire and fury. Okay? And his National Security Advisor, McMaster, was mentioning the possibility of preventive war on North Korea. Various columnists wrote columns in New York Times and Washington Post urging the American government to deliberate on the possibility of preemptive attack on North Korea, preemptive strike on North Korea. And after North Korea test-fired ICBM, Hwasong 15, on November 29th, Pentagon was reportedly adopting blood-nose strategy on North Korea, meaning what? Coming up with a massive military attack on North Korea so that North Korea would lose its will to fight. Therefore, the blood-nose strategy really assumes massive military attack in the first hand. Therefore, we are equally worried about the American move, because if the United States takes military action on North Korea, then North Korea will retaliate. Then there will be an all-out, full-blown escalation on the Korean Peninsula. Then we had the problem with China. As North Korea was increasing its hostile intention and action, we had to rely on the United States, and U.S. strongly urged us to allow the deployment of THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System. Of course, the President Park Geun-hye decided to allow it. But President Moon, during the election campaign, opposed that idea. But judged on the North Korean provocation and public opinion, he had to accept American demand. And then China was very angry. China began to impose economic sanctions against South Korea. In the first 6 months, our loss amounted to almost $8 billion US. U.S. cut off the tourist, group tourist, to Korea, and China also implement a lot of so-called punitive economic measures against Korean firms in China. Therefore, all of a sudden, we have realized there is a kind of hegemonic rivalry over the Korean Peninsula between China and the United States. Finally, like in Taiwan, South Korea is extremely polarized, and conservative rightist and liberal leftist. They're extremely polarized. And particularly conservatives, after losing the election, in fact, refused to accept the legitimacy of the Moon Jae-in government. But in dealing with national security affairs, if there is such a polarization, then president becomes extremely difficult president to come up with an efficient and effective national security policy. That was a picture in 2017. Then 2018, there was fundamental changes, starting with the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic. North Korea sent a delegation, and we reciprocate by sending special envoys to North Korea on March 5th and 6th. And Chairman Kim Jong-un, again, came up with a very, very warm message to us. He told our special envoys that he will hold North-South Korean summit talk toward the end of April. And also he agreed to open hotlines between two leaders, between the North and the South. And he also agreed to denuclearize. If there is no nuclear threat coming from the United States, there is no reason for us to develop nuclear weapons. Denuclearization is the will of my grandfather and my father. And also, Chairman Kim Jong-un urged South Korea to play the role of a mediator between Pyongyang and Washington. And he asked our government to deliver a message to President Trump. And also, Chairman Kim Jong-un said that if U.S. and South Korea do not engage in joint military exercise and training, North Korea would not engage in any kind of provocative behavior. It was really good. And after our special envoy returned to Seoul, they went to Washington on March 9th and 10th. And they met President Trump on March 9th. President Trump willingly accepted North Korean invitation to hold the summit. Of course, he turned down North Korean invitation to Pyongyang, but President Trump told the South Korean special envoys that he is more than willing to meet Chairman Kim Jong-un. That was the beginning of increasing relations between Washington and Pyongyang. And afterwards, we had April 27th North-South Korean Summit in Panmunjom. And then we had the June 12th Singapore Summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un. And then we had another important event in Pyongyang. That is the September 19th and 20th North-South Korean Summit in Pyongyang. Therefore, in 2018, there was a great reversal of trend. And then and our government came up with a slogan saying, peace, new beginning. And we saw the new horizon of peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula, as well as denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But in February 2019, things began to fall apart. President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un met in Hanoi on February 27th and 28th. They failed to come up with any compromise. Since then, things began to fall apart. Inter-Korean relations virtually get to the full stop. And North Korea-US negotiations were going through the process of ups and downs. And they held the Stockholm working level meeting on October 5th. North Korea declared it was an outright failure. And they accused that Steve Biegun, North American representative, came with empty hand without any new method and declared it is an outright failure. And North Korea didn't respond to the Swedish government invitation to hold another working level talk in 2 weeks. But State Department come up with a complete different response. What North Korea is saying is not true. We had a very amicable discussions for 8.5 hours, okay? And we held a very constructive dialogue, and also we came up with very creative ideas, and we exchanged those creative ideas with North Korea. Therefore, it's quite opposite in the responses. But I gave a very brief overview of what happened and what went on in inter-Korean relations, US-DPRK relations, and North Korean nuclear issues. But in doing that, President Moon Jae-in came up with a very unique approach, which he termed as a Korea Peace Process Initiative. Okay. His policy is very straightforward. First, his goal is to realize nuclear weapons-free, peaceful, and prosperous Korean Peninsula. That is his goal. Okay. In doing that, he came up with a set of principles. First principle is no war at any cost. No war. And primacy of peace. Second, we wouldn't tolerate nuclear North Korea. Will not possess any nuclear weapons either. Okay? Will not allow deployment of American tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea. But North Korea, you should get rid of nuclear weapons. And also he said that the international cooperation, particularly cooperation and coordination with the United States, is essential. Okay? And finally, he emphasized the importance of national consensus, because we cannot achieve peace and denuclearization without having national consensus. Those are kinds of basic principles. Then he adopted the four strategies. First strategy is peacemaking strategy, because his policy was, to some extent, was reformulated after North Korea engaged in provocative behavior in 2017. Therefore, for him, the most important thing is to prevent outbreak of war. Then how can you do that? We should build a military deterrence capability. And also we should strengthen alliance with the United States. Particularly not right now, North Korea has nuclear weapons, but we do not have nuclear weapons. Then we got to rely on extended deterrence with the United States. We should rely on the American nuclear umbrella. Okay? And North Korea has been test launching all kinds of ballistic missiles, then we should have a missile defense capability. That is why Moon Jae-in government adopted the so-called, whole idea of active defense, intercepting incoming missiles. Okay? That is why we are in the process of acquiring Patriot missiles number 3, PAC-3, okay? And also we have been emphasizing the importance of offensive defense too. That is why we are acquiring, F-35 stealth fighter, okay? And also battle management is very important, command control, communication, surveillance, and reconnaissance. We have AWACS, and also we are about to acquire Global Hawk, high-altitude, unmanned surveillance in a plane. Therefore, our government is putting a lot of resources. In fact, our defense spending rose by more than 7%. During the conservative government, which emphasized the national security, their annual increase was 2 to 3% maximum. But Moon Jae-in government increased 7.6% first year, last year. Okay? And this year, again, 6.8%. And by the end of our government, meaning 2021, and our defense spending will be exceeding almost 50 billion US dollars. Quite huge. But for him, he cannot play with the national security. Okay? It's not simply because of oppositions from conservative, because conservative, right-wing conservatives argue that President Moon is compromising national security. No, not because of that reason. President Moon used to be a soldier at the Special Forces Command. Therefore, he served for 3 years. Therefore, he knew how to, cope with clear and present dangers. But at the same time, he has been pursuing the strategy of peacemaking. Peacemaking means what? Reducing tension, building confidence, and ending the Korean War through the adoption of a declaration to end the war, and transforming armistice agreement into some sort of peace accord, and eventually creating lasting peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. Okay? Therefore, he has been really pushing for the peacemaking. Okay? The summit talks reflect part of that kind of peacemaking efforts. And third strategy is peace-building strategy. Peace-building strategy, in fact, echoes Immanuel Kant's permanent peace. Okay? Peacemaking, peace-building, peacekeeping and peacemaking are strategies to maintain and manage unstable peace. But peace-building aims at eradicating, eliminating structural causes of conflict. And President Moon strongly believes in peace economy as a way of eliminating structural causes of conflict. Therefore, he strongly believes that there should be greater exchange and cooperation between North and South, greater economic integration, so that we can have free flow of people, goods, and services. If that being the case, okay, between two countries, North Korea as a sovereign state, South Korea as a sovereign state, then we'll not have to worry about war or the military conflict, like a European Union. That is what he calls peace economy. Okay? And then he suggested new economic map of the Korean Peninsula, in which he wanted to reconnect railroad. He wanted to reconnect road. Okay? He wanted to build energy networks between the North and South, all of which can stretch into China, Trans-China Railroad System, and TSR, Trans-Siberian Railroad System. That was his dream, and he termed it as a new Northern policy. Okay? But then now he has been suggesting peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building. Lastly, has been emphasizing proactive role. He's not tolerant about Korea passing. Even yesterday, he emphasized that we should determine our own destiny. We cannot leave our destiny to somebody else. We cannot outsource our future of our destiny to outside forces. Therefore, for him, South Korea should play a more proactive role in bringing peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. There comes whole the idea of a mediator, facilitator. Okay. Of course, we know all the structural limitations. Therefore, that is what, it's a very summarized fashion of his peace initiative. But problem is that, first of all, there are a lot of contradictions. Peacekeeping and peacemaking cannot go in tandem. And peacemaking and peace building may not go in tandem. Okay? Because while we buying the advanced weapon system from the United States, okay, and then we're talking about peace with North Korea, and North Korea is saying that, oh, you're cheating. And then we're doing all these good words about peacekeeping, yet President Moon has been emphasizing peace economy, peace building. But peace building can give an impression of what? All the conservative unification rhetoric. That means unification by absorption. Okay? Lead North Korea into the market, and South Korea could absorb North Korea. Therefore, North Koreans somewhat worrisome about this contradictory nature of peace initiative. But President Moon has been trying to reduce that kinds of contradictions. But the real problem is North Korean nuclear problem. Therefore, first issue on North Korean nuclear issue is North Korea nuclear weapons country or not? There are several indicators to judge whether North Korea is a full-fledged nuclear weapon state or not. First, does North Korea have a nuclear warhead? Yes, North Korea has a nuclear warhead, both plutonium and uranium bomb. North Korea has at least 15 to 40 nuclear bombs. American intelligence community has given 60 to 65. But the most educated expert on North Korean nuclear program, such as Siegfried Hecker, would come up with about 35. North Korea has a uranium production facility, plutonium production facility. North Korea has uranium and plutonium, highly enriched uranium and plutonium, and has bombs. Therefore, North Korea satisfies first condition. Second condition is, does North Korea have a delivery vehicle? Yes, it has a short-range missile, Scud B and C, okay, and also intermediate ballistic missile, Hwasong 13 and 14, what they call the North Star in the Bukguksang. Okay. And also, they have ICBM, but I would say that a lot of experts doubt North Korea has a full-fledged ICBM capability or not. In the case of the United States, in order to have a deployable ICBM, U.S. would go through about 15 to 17 trials. But North Korea testified only one. Therefore, a long way to go. But North Korea has proven that it has a capability. And North Korea also has a submarine-launched ballistic missiles. There is a North Star. Therefore, North Korea has a delivery capability on South Korea and Japan, and even Guam. Okay. And third, has North Korea engaged in nuclear testing? Yes, North Korea engages 6 times. For the past 3 nuclear testings, were all successful. Finally, has North Korea miniaturized their bombs, making nuclear bombs smaller and lighter so that they can carry all the way to the US mainland? There's a competing interpretations, but North Korea claims it has completed miniaturization, but the Western observers argue that North Korea has not reached that one. But regardless, if we cannot deny North Korea has a nuclear weapon state. However, we cannot accept or recognize North Korean nuclear status. We are a member of NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. Okay? Only 5 countries are allowed to have a nuclear weapons. North Korea cannot be recognized as a nuclear weapon state. Then why we are so concerned about North Korean nuclear weapons? First, if North Korea possesses nuclear weapons, there will be no peace on the Korean Peninsula. Second, if North Korea perceives it is stronger than us, then North Korea will never give up its old strategy of so-called United Front strategy. 통일전선, 잔회. And third, if North Korea possesses nuclear weapons, South Koreans, whether we have American extended deterrence or not, there will be growing pressure for the possession of independent nuclear weapons in South Korea. If South Korea possesses a nuclear weapon, Japan will have a nuclear weapon. If that being the case, then Taiwan will push for the nuclear weapons. Then there will be nuclear domino in Northeast Asia. Nobody wants it. It is better to die by conventional weapons, not by nuclear bombs. Okay. Fourth reason is the whole proliferation danger. In fact, today I went, we have the Mr. Kuo is here. That, he asked me at the United Daily newspaper, TV station. I was interviewed by him in the morning, and he asked a question. Isn't it non-proliferation is a primary concern? Okay. Maybe he might have raised that question out of despair, but I said no. Okay. But Americans, and particularly European countries, are very much concerned about proliferation, particularly if it is a highly enriched uranium bomb. Bomb can be very small. They can carry in 007 briefcase. And therefore, a lot of European countries worried about proliferation. For those reasons, we should oppose. Then why North Korea is trying to acquire nuclear weapons? I think there are several reasons. But when I talked with the North Koreans, they strongly believe that they need a minimal nuclear deterrence capability against the United States. I couldn't believe, but that is what they believe. That is what they're telling me is this. If U.S. attacks a North Korea, that will be not only conventional, but also military, the nuclear. Therefore, we should have a minimum nuclear deterrent capability. That is the first logic. Second logic, South Korean economy is about more than 40 times larger than North Korean economy. Our defense spending is about 10 times more than North Korean defense spending. There is no way for North Korea to catch up with a conventional arms race. Therefore, North Koreans think that having nuclear weapons is the most economical way of coping with inferiority in conventional arms race. Third, purely domestic political reasons. Having nuclear bomb will enhance Chairman Kim Jong-un's domestic political legitimacy. And also he can co-opt the military, okay, by giving some incentive to the military. Fourth, I think North Korea can use nuclear capability as a bargaining leverage vis-a-vis the United States. It is historically proven. When North Korea shows very quiet behavior, U.S. does not deal with North Korea. But when and if North Korea undertook ICBM testing, nuclear testing, then all of a sudden the United States is desperate to talk with the North Koreans. Therefore, North Korea learned a very simple lesson. You should raise a voice by showing provocative behavior, then U.S. will come to us. Then U.S. will respect us. Those are the reasons. Then what is the current status? I'm going beyond 40 minutes. I will start within 10 minutes. In Stockholm meeting, for example, what went wrong with Hanoi in February? It's all known that North Korea came up with a very interesting proposal. Chairman Kim Jong-un made a very concrete proposal. I will completely and permanently eliminate nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. The U.S. lift 5 UN Security Council sanctioned resolutions since 2016, as they are related to civilian economy and people's livelihood. President Trump turned it down. He proposed big deal, all for all. You dismantle nuclear biochemical missile in first place, then we will promise bright future of North Korean economy. There is no reason for North Korea to accept it. Okay? That was the real reason. Okay? Therefore, American big deal approach and North Korean small deal approach, that was a source of disharmony between Washington and Pyongyang. But the Yongbyon deal is not the small deal. Yongbyon has a 5 megawatt nuclear reactor. It has research, the light water nuclear reactor for research purposes. It has a fuel fabrication plant. It has a radiochemical reprocessing plant to separate plutonium from spent fuel rod. It has a tritium laboratories, which are essential for production of hydrogen bomb. And most importantly, it has a highly enriched uranium production facilities with more than 2,000 centrifuge systems. Therefore, according to Dr. Hecker, Siegfried Hecker of Stanford University, Yongbyon would account for at least 60 to 70% of North Korean nuclear capability. He even used the term, Yongbyon is the heart of North Korean nuclear program. Then I still wonder why President Trump didn't accept it. Maybe a lot of analysts argue that it has something to do with domestic politics. The same day, Michael Cohen was making testimony in U.S. Congress. Same hour, which nearly. Therefore, President Trump could not go back to Washington with some deal. Therefore, he proposed a big deal, got a no deal, and returned to Washington with a no deal. That could be much more face-saving measure. Then what happened in Stockholm on October 5th? I think there are two major issues. One is the scope of denuclearization. Again, American position hasn't changed a lot. Okay? American, according to several sources, it's not from our government, okay? Yomiuri Shimbun and some Vox and some American and Korean mass media, and I can come up with some kinds of synthesized view. It is reported that Steve Biegun demanded North Korea to make a commitment to transfer all the nuclear, biochemical, and ICBM, biochemical weapons, ICBM, to the United States. Commitment to transfer, okay? And also commitment to dismantle all the nuclear, biochemical, and missile-related production facilities. And he demanded North Korea to comply with what North Korea proposed in Hanoi, meaning, verifiable, complete dismantling of nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. Okay? And plus alpha, so the hidden nuclear facilities. That's a commitment to declare and dismantle hidden nuclear facilities. In return, it was known that the United States, anyhow, there is a scope. American demand and the scope of denuclearization is comprehensive. I understand that North Korea didn't go beyond their proposal, Yongbyon proposal made in Hanoi. Second issue is corresponding measures. in return for what was demanded, U.S. promised lifting partial sanctions, such as ban on export of coal and textiles, and resumption of humanitarian assistance. Okay? And also possibility of helping North Korea developing complex, the tourist complex in Galma near Wonsan with international capital. Those are the things which the US offered to North Korea. But North Korea couldn't accept it. And what North Korea wanted, after the Kim Myung-gil, North Korean representative, after he got out of negotiation talk, what he said was this: I had the big expectation, but the American representative came with empty hand, without any new method. Okay? What the North Korea wanted was very simple: permanent, irreversible, and complete and irreversible withdrawal of a hostile policy that threatens North Korean security and that hampers North Korean people's right to existence and development. That means what? What North Korea is wanting is you come up with a complete security assurance, diplomatic normalization, non-aggression treaty, suspension of joint military exercise and training, no more transfer of cutting-edge weapons to South Korea. At the same time, North Korea wanting lifting of sanctions. Unless you accept those things, we are not going to give up nuclear weapons. Now, North Korea gave a deadline until the end of December. And then if US does not come up with a new method, then North Korean leaders said that North Korea will go for a new way, okay? Untraveled new way. We do not know yet, but there are some guesses, First, North Korea will declare that there is a nuclear weapon state and no more nuclear negotiation. Second, it will emphasize, 自立, 更生, self-reliant, development. Okay? No more dependency, like Chairman Mao's strategy. Okay? And third one is strengthening diplomatic relations with China and Russia. Okay? I think that was most likely to be new way for North Korea. It's very difficult because it is virtually impossible to have a peace without denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, our government position is a simultaneous pursuit of denuclearization and peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. But then, in fact, progress in denuclearization is kind of prerequisite for peacemaking on the Korean Peninsula. But nuclear deal is between the US and North Korea. If they do not make a progress, then inter-Korean relations will be virtually, stopped. That is now our situation. And it's not easy, but what we need is we need prudence, patience, and realism in dealing with North Korea. But again, without having peace on the Korean Peninsula, and like without having peace across the strait, there will be no peace in East Asia. That is why peace on the Korean Peninsula is so vital to peace and stability in East Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juin, for your really brilliant, talks. And for me, it's truly educational. And before I open up the floor, collecting comment and question from our audience, I would like to use the privilege of being the moderator to throw at you the first question. We all know that, you are among the very few policy advisors who travel with President Kim Dae-jung to Pyongyang, right? The first, that's historical visit. And also you are a member of delegation with President Roh Han, again, to Pyongyang, okay? And now you are the key advisor to Professor Moon Choo-en. And you are so much involved in the engagement and dialogue and negotiation. So you had the very really unique, exceptional experience eyewitnessing and also dealing with the North Korean, including observing the two kings, right? Kim Jong-un and his father, Kim Jong-il. How would you size them up? They are, because in the Western media, there's all kinds of different characterization of the regime, but also particular the two charismatic leader, how pragmatic they are, and how rational and how calculating, and are they, I should say, trustworthy in terms of cutting the deal, and so on and so forth. So what was your personal the assessment of the two kings? Yeah.
Yes, I'm the only civilian who attended summit in Pyongyang all 3 times. Yeah. I attended the 3 summits as a special delegate. Of course, Chairman Kim Jong-il was much more aged and much more mature than the new leader Kim Jong-un. But there's sheer commonality, and I think that Kim Jong-un should have learned from his father. First of all, they're extremely decisive, and they're surprisingly well-versed what's going on outside the world. Therefore, North Korea is known as a Hummy Kingdom, but they know what's going on, particularly what's going on in South Korea. Okay? And therefore, in other words, they are not ill-informed. They were extremely well-informed. Okay? And also, as I pointed, they are extremely decisive. Once they make a decision, okay, and the things turn around. But one difference is, during Chairman Kim Jong-il period, even though he promised something, actual implementation could take a long time, or sometimes it was totally ignored. But under Kim Jong-un period, no. Whatever he promised, things turn around instantly. For example, yesterday he visited Mount Kumgang area, and he pointed out that all these facilities built by South Korea look ugly. Why don't you get rid of them in consultation with South Korea? Today, North Korea sent an official letter saying that they wanted to have a discussion on that issue. Under Kim Jong-il, that was not the case. And also, definitely, Kim Jong-un is known as a very cruel leader, impulsive leader, and unpredictable leader. But I didn't detect those elements when I saw him in Panmunjom and in Pyongyang. For example, in Pyongyang, I proposed a toast to him. I went to the table and proposed a toast, and he stood up. And he was telling me and some other delegates that how hard it was to come all the way here. There should be no retrogression. And we should produce outcomes as soon as possible. He repeated those words twice. Therefore, also he lived in Switzerland at least 4 years. Therefore, he has some international sense and whatever. But anyhow, he was not rigid. He was flexible. He was willing to talk. Okay, but he was a charismatic leader. All these old North Korean senior officers, their behavior in front of him was really beyond our imagination. I cannot describe it, but he had really firm control of North Korean elite. That is my observation.
Terrific. Now I welcome comment, question from the audience. Don't be shy. Yes. Please identify yourself first. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You know, in fact, I'm a lay missionary, but usually a Catholic missionary or Catholic religious, they take 3 vows. One is poverty, one is obedience, one is chastity. If I consider as religious, I will take the 4th vow is peace, for peace. So, you know, I really very much like to have a topic about this, for peace. So I have questions. In fact, because I studied in USA, I should understand English pretty well, but in fact, not perfect, because I stay in Taiwan for many years and, you know, don't use English all the way. So, you know, still have hard time to
Your English is better than mine.
Yeah, but you know, I hardly catch all of your ideas. But however, I'm going to ask you maybe 4 questions. But very simple. One is defined defensive, you know, active defense. You talk about active defense, peace economy. And then third, maybe I want to ask you, what's going on? What's the problem? As I know, not long ago, I'm very happy because Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, said want to give up nuclear weapons and want to start to develop an economy, and also meet with Wen在寅, and everything going fine, go to the prosperity and, you know, peace. But what happened now changed, now has tension between 2 sides. So what's happened, what's going on, what's the problem? And the first question is, I'm going to ask you is, the US government really want to have peace? Because as I heard, weapon corporation, I mean, those businessmen for weapons, you know, they have a big influence on U.S. government. So, you know, they like to sell weapons so they can earn some profit. In that case, you end confrontation between 2 sides. No weapon can sell. But if they keep tension, it's good for them to make money. So is really U.S. government want peace for 2 sides, and also for 2 sides of Taiwan and China too. But this is the second part. Maybe not, you don't need to answer, but for Korea, please forgive me, so many questions.
Yes, really, so many questions. As I recollect, let me respond to you. I will start the last one, okay? Does America interest in peace on the Korean Peninsula? I really believe in it. The majority of American citizens, you know, want peace on the Korean Peninsula. But we are somewhat confused because now in 2017, when President Trump talked about fire and fury, you know, we all thought that he is a warmonger. But when he held a meeting in Singapore, all of a sudden he became a hero of peacemaking on the Korean Peninsula. We have a really confusing view on him. But even right now, on the one hand, he's trying to, you know, solve North Korean nuclear problem, you know, through dialogue and negotiation, yet no progress. And as you pointed out, the U.S. wanted to sell more weapons to South Korea, which North Korea doesn't like it. Okay? Therefore, we are confusing what is the real identity of American foreign policy on North Korea. But as far as I know, you know, Americans want a peace on the Korean Peninsula, but the elite in North Korea is divided. And as you know, as you pointed out, there is a military complex in the United States, and they want to, you know, promote their own institutional interest, whatever. Therefore, look, democracy is all the time messy. There's no clear answer. Okay, South Korea, Taiwan, you know, even you look at the Great Britain. Okay, therefore, and America cannot be such a clean, angel-like country. You know, the U.S. makes mistakes and etc. Therefore, we should be aware of that kind of uncertainty on the part of the United States. In that way, we can enhance our, you know, desire to have a peace on the Korean Peninsula. As to Kim Jong-un's, you know, motives, yeah, you're right. And after things went well in early part of 2018, and he held a very important meeting of North Korean Workers' Party, the ruling party, on April 20th. 2018, he convened the plenary session of Central Committee of Korea Workers' Party, and he gave us 3 instructions. First, reconstruction of socialist economy. Second, promotion science and technology. Third, cultivation of qualified human resources. And then up until that time, his policy was a simultaneous development of nuclear weapons and economic development. But on the occasion of that April 20th meeting, he never used nuclear weapons, economic development first. And since then on, we have been saying that Kim Jong-un adopted the Shenzhen Danger, okay? That's the economy first policy, okay? Therefore, in that sense, we are hoping, but if we do not resolve North Korean nuclear problem peacefully, and after January next year, he may return to the simultaneous development of nuclear weapons and economic development. But up until that time, he will stick to economy first policy. Peace economy is just very simple, making peace through economy. Therefore, Immanuel Kant says, trading states do not fight each other. And later, scholars coined it as a capitalist peace. Therefore, you can think about peace economy as an extension of Immanuel Kant's capitalist peace. And offense and defense, missile defense, like Russia, China, and all other countries who do not have extensive missile defense system reject the whole idea of so-called defensive purpose dimension of a missile defense. They think that we cannot make distinction between offense and defense. They're the same. Okay? But the American position is very simple. Intercepting incoming missile, that's defensive. But if we detect others' intention earlier, so that if we stage a preemptive strike on others, it's still defensive, but with offensive nature. But Russia, China, and North Korea all argue that no, that's all offensive. Therefore, the missile defense system is being said it is defensive, but in reality it is offensive because of this offensive defense nature of a missile defense system. Therefore, it is extremely controversial.
Well, amazingly, you answer all 4 questions. Yes, next. Yes, Tonglen, yeah. Did you conduct the interview yesterday? Okay.
My question is regarding the relation between China and North Korea. There are several indications early on that there may have been some tension between China and North Korea. The last 3 nuclear tests, North Korea notified China later than they notified Russia. That's one indication. And North Korea tests their missiles sometimes in the very awkward hour when China is having a big international event. They held their missile test. So there's some people in the United States speculating whether by having agreement with North Korea can drive an edge between North Korea and China and turn North Korea just like Vietnam had been. Do you think that's a possibility?
It is very difficult to understand the China-North Korea relations. Both hate each other and both do not trust each other, yet they are close. And when crucial moments come, they get into very deep consultation. Okay? For example, since Hanoi, North Korea was not moving. But President Xi Jinping visited Pyongyang. When he went there, it is known that he gave 800,000 metric tons of food to North Korea. Okay? And also it is known that Chairman Kim Jong-un sent a message to President Trump through President Xi Jinping about his willingness to meet President Trump. Therefore, since the days of, well, I would say that since 1956, when pro-Chinese Yan'an faction staged a military coup to oust Kim Il-sung, since then on, really China-North Korea relations get worsened. Okay? And because of that reason, North Koreans wouldn't trust China very much. Okay? That is why North Koreans wanted to have good relations with the United States, if the United States recognized the North Korean regime. But now, since last year, early last year, things changed. Now, China-DPRK relations are wide and deep. And I personally understand there are a lot of things going on, and the depth of consultation is also very extensive. Therefore, I would say that nowadays, China-North Korea relations will be very different from the past. Now, that is what I can all give you.
Okay, yes, please. Yeah. Please identify yourself.
Hello, Premier Zhang. Okay. Mayor Ye. Okay, I'm here. Okay, gonna stand up. And Dr. Zhu, Dr. Wen, my name is Jason. I'm the CEO of Taipei Language Institute, specializing in training Chinese language as a pioneer and authority in the world. So I think my view about the Northeast Asia relationships is really, I don't think it militarily, okay, we do not have a choices. It really depends on the US and the China, because as a developed regions, we cannot even afford any kind of situations happen in the South Asia Sea, the Japanese Seas, and the East Seas. So especially the power supplies. So my view is really focusing on the consensus. Okay, how does Japan, Korea, and Taiwan that we can work as a powerful trios, as economically bounded together, okay, and that somehow has a leverage over China. So I think my questions and concern really is how does North Korean, as the fusions with the South Korean economically, how would that shape the current landscape of the structures? So as I said, like I think the purpose of this question really is, I believe economic fusions will provide a peaceful regions in this area. Thank you.
It's a very difficult question to answer, but answer seems to be rather easy. I really don't think it is a good idea to exclude China. China should be in. Yet we can cooperate, we can promote cooperation among South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. Okay? And there's no reason why we exclude China if China doesn't have a very malign intention in doing that one. But as to the common prosperity, there's no reason why China opposes it. For example, Masayoshi Son proposed smart grid, so-called super smart grid, involving Japan, South North Korea, China, Russia, in the Dongbei area in China, and Russia and Far East. But I think Taiwan should be included in that one too. Okay? You cannot be left out. Therefore, for me, exclusiveness is not a good idea. Once you exclude some country, then that creates a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding leads to distrust. Distrust leads to hostility. Therefore, I would propose a more inclusive approach. And
I like that we are more culturally similar, in a sense, and we are in the middle between China and the US, and we all suffer from these complex situations. But if we're not to work together, then we will not work together to have a leverage with China to include them into the game. So I believe that this most beautiful situation is Taiwan, Korea, China. Okay, we all share the similar cultures, but we could prove to the world, okay, that even we have these differences now, but it's only temporarily. Okay, like Taiwan and China, we have been keeping peace for the past 70 years. Nowhere else in the world you can see something happen like this. So it's like we gotta reinforce this synergy working together and tell the outsiders to stop putting the hand, okay, trying to really, in a sense, try to affect our peaceful relationships.
Oh, yes.
So I think North Korea is really playing a really important role because it's the key. It's trying to become more like a socialist, Kim Jong-un kind of economic, right? But basically it's following the path of China in the past 40 years. So I think really I would like to get more insights about how North Korea will fit in the pictures and how does that change in the landscape.
And North Korea is desperate to get into that kind of cooperative game, but because of sanctions. The North Korea in catch-22 in a situation. North Korea is desperate to have that kind of cooperation, but because of sanctions, North Korea cannot be part of it. Okay. For example, in fact, former President Ma Ying-jeou's 4 principles of cross-strait relations, what Jianni Huxin, what Gezi, Jianyin, and what Qiudong, Chuni, and Gongchang, Sang, So Shuang Ying, those are very popular in Korea too, because sunshine policy is exactly the same as that one. Sunshine policy by President Kim Dae-jung was, he emphasized separation of politics and economy first, politics later. Civilian first, government later. Easy thing first, difficult thing later. And most importantly, giving first, taking later. That is, and Xian Gong Ho De, and that is President Kim Dae-jung's policy. But again, what is important in dealing with China, Taiwanese should solve the problem. Neither Japan nor South Korea can intervene. Okay? Therefore, but again, like within the frame of APEC, Taiwan should be a very constructive member of economic community. Therefore, when it is whether superpower grid or any kind of things, and Taiwan deserves to be part of it. But you should have fuller cooperation with China, because China has a veto over South Korea and Japan. Because as you know, we have a trilateral summit framework. China, Japan, South Korean, annual summit talks. Therefore, China can raise, the grievances. Therefore, we will respect China. But if you come up with some terms of cooperation with China, Japan and South Korea will welcome.
As you can tell, that Professor Moon can speak Mandarin. As a matter of fact, when he was a child, he was surrounded by overseas Chinese. And his father had lived in China for many years, before returning to South Korea in 1948. As a matter of fact, I just learned yesterday, traveling with him, his father is a very important sponsor for establishing the Chinese language school in Jeju. So he's very close connection.
My father was official interpreter of Jeju provincial government.
Okay.
For Chinese interpreter. Therefore, when there was refugees from the Shantung province, there was no one who spoke Chinese. My father was the only person. Therefore, my father represented the interest of Shantung refugees. And at the time, our government never allowed foreigners to buy properties. Therefore, my father bought the school property for Chinese community. And then later on, after 20 years later, he transferred the property right to the Chinese community. Therefore, we have a good ties.
Who's next? Okay, Han-pu first, and then the lady next. Okay, Han-pu, yeah. Professor Heinz Tong of National Taiwan U. He's a graduate of Harvard Department of Government, yeah.
Well, thank you for the introduction. So I don't have to say that. I have a very quick question about your assessment for North Korea, and pretty much like a little bit piggyback on what the question raised by this gentleman. So one of my research interests is the political economy of dictatorships. And so one of the very important consensus from that literature is that to have economic growth, you need to have very good infrastructure in a dictatorship. So that's probably one of the very important reasons why China can be so successful, because they have, Communist Party, and basically Deng Xiaoping, set up a great institution for conflict resolution among elites, or sometimes even for dealing with social conflicts. So when Donald Trump met with Kim Jong-un, actually a colleague of mine, we were thinking about if one day, if North Korea adopts a very similar Chinese style reform, in other words, having an authoritarian government and basically a combination of an authoritarian government and economic openness, then what would happen to North Korea? Because North Korea, according to the literature, basically they are classified as a personalist regime, vis-a-vis China, which was characterized as a one-party dominance regime. So in other words, as I said, China has all these very well-established institutional infrastructure for economic growth and dealing with potential conflicts along with the economic growth. But what's your views on North Korea in terms of whether they have enough infrastructure, institutional infrastructure, for dealing with potential conflicts arising from economic growth? Thank you very much.
That's another very difficult question, but North Korea right now is an extremely monolithic country. Okay? But some North Korean specialists argue that there is a growing conflict among generations. Okay? Perhaps the Persian execution of Chairman Kim Jong-un's uncle has something to do with the generational conflict rather than personal, punishment of, Chang Sung-taek. Therefore, when Chang Sung-taek was a kind of patron of Chairman Kim Jong-un, up until then, these old cadre were monopolizing all the economic benefits. Therefore, young generation who were educated abroad had the connections with outside, couldn't find any, incentives. Okay, and it was old generation had a monopoly of rent. Therefore, new generation didn't have it. Therefore, some scholars argue that it was a very conscious political move to eliminate the Chang Sung-taek as a way of eliminating monopolistic position of elder generations and let the young generation get in. Therefore, I would argue that now the young generations have become most important coalition partner of Kim Jong-un. In fact, when I was in Pyongyang last year, all the important decisions, in fact, run by the young guys, young generation. Therefore, a lady, the Kim Yo-jong, whatever, let young people. Of course, 40s and 50s, and they are young. And the North Korea is also a very gerontological society. But there is a generational conflict, one at one. Another issue is what in the military, I would say the most well-organized, most powerful vested interest in North Korea. And how to deal with North Korea, that would be a very interesting case. But even Chairman Kim Jong-un told our president that, we need manpower. Therefore, North Korean youth should serve in the military for 10 years. That's too long. Therefore, Chairman Kim Jong-un told our president that I really wanted to get rid of in a conflictual situation so that we can divert those young people to the development project. Okay? Therefore, he should go with that kinds of generational versus a military, non-military, in fact, particular party between the party and the military. Those are the major conflictual sources. And also, North Korea has now, a farmers market, the informal sector. Now, North Korean economy is composed of formal economy called, planned economy, okay, the people's economy. Second economy called the military economy. Third one is unification market. It's a government-sponsored market system. And then farmers market. There's an informal sector. In early 1980s, China had that kinds of farmers market. And then black market. Now a lot of people, a lot of economists would believe that this, in a people's economy, is virtually broken. It is doing very little public distribution function. A military economy separate. And then, in fact, the unification market, farmers market, black market are major forces of economic change in North Korea. Therefore, a lot of North Korean specialists argue that North Korea is a market economy. But it's not formally institutionalized. Therefore, those who understand North Korean economy very well argue that if there is a loosening of sanctions, then opening and reform and marketization in North Korea will take less than 3 years. There's a market, unification market, farmers market, and the black market. That those three elements account for most 60 to 70% of North Korean economic output. But North Korean elite might be worried if there is a formalization of those sectors might become the sources of opposition and grievances. But it's a North Korean leader to take care of it. It's not our concern. It's a North Korean leader's choice. I don't know whether I answered your question or not.
Thank you. Yes, people say that the three people that Kim Jong-un trusts most, they are all female. His wife, his sister, younger sister, and that vice minister of foreign affairs.
Therefore, three means there are in fact four. For Lee Seol-ju is his wife.
Okay.
And then Kim Yo-jong is his younger sister.
Younger sister, yeah.
And Choi-sun, he's the first vice foreign minister.
Yeah.
And the last is Hyun Song-wol. She's a deputy head of propaganda department under Kim Yo-jong.
Yeah.
She's a famous singer.
Okay, now we recognize two ladies. Okay, over here first. Yeah, okay, and you are next.
Hi, Professor Wen. Yeah, I'm Andrew Hong, and I have a question here. Today, I read the news that South Korea announced to give up its developing country status in World Trade Organization in future negotiations. And we know that it means South Korea will no longer seek for a special treatment as developing country. Yeah. And is it a symbol of changing between the United States and Republic of Korea's relations, or is it a yield to the United States pressure? And I'd like to explore your personal perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, that has been an old question, because with regard to our status in World Trade Organization, first we graduated from the GSP, Generalized System of Preference, regarding manufacturing sector, like Taiwan. And the remaining one is whether we are developing country or developing country with regard to the agricultural production. And farmers account for less than 5% of Korean population. But in terms of actual size, farmers is weak. But in terms of political power and the mobilization power, farmers are quite formidable. Our government worked very hard to preserve South Korea as a developing country in the agricultural sector. But President Trump is pushing very hard. That's contradictory. You are 11th largest economy in the world, and how can you be a developing country? Okay? And the US is pushing us to get away from developing status in agricultural sector. But apparently, the pressure is very hard from the US, and our government decided to accept American demand. And also that was a recommendation from WTO too. But now the opposition from the farmers will be very, very intensified. There'll be another fire and fury in domestic setting. Therefore, let us wait and see.
Yes, yeah, the lady in the back. Yeah, thank you for your patience.
Hello, Professor Zhu and also Professor Moon. I'm a student from Chongqing University, and my topic of my research is also related to Korean relations. So I just have two simple questions I want to ask. The first is that since inter-Korean relations is so important to the East Asia peace, so Taiwan, as a member in this region, what can Taiwan do, or what kind of role can Taiwan play? And also, is it possible if Taiwan and Korea can cooperate together to facilitate the peace in this region? And second, my second question is that how do you see how will you evaluate the relations between Japan and South Korea? Because it's not as good as before. So thank you.
The first question is a very difficult question, but think about Singapore. Singapore has just 6 million population, but has been the pace setter in ideas. Therefore, Taiwanese policy community and academic community can come up with a lot of innovative ideas on how to reduce tension, how to enhance confidence among countries in the region. Okay, and therefore, in other words, you have a very special status. Okay, and therefore you might have a diplomatic. You might have limitations on diplomatic maneuver, but in terms of ideas, you can come up with a lot of good ideas, and you can sell those ideas. For example, cross-strait relations. As I cited the 4 principles of President Ma Ying-jeou, we might have a lot to learn from you, okay? And therefore, in that way, in other words, you should enhance your soft power and smart power. In that way, you can promote new ideas so that scholars and policymakers from other countries can rally behind you. In that way, you can, set the tone for, cooperation. As the second question, Japan-South Korea relations. And we always say that Japan and South Korea near but distant countries. Okay, geographically near, but mentally distant, and that has become kind of reality, They started with forced labor workers issues, okay? And Japan argued that in accordance with 1965 claim settlement accord between Japan and South Korea, all the claims over forced labor workers were settled. And then Japan argued that we paid all the compensation, that's period. But our government position is this, because the case was first surfaced because there was a civil case, a civil suit, so-called those forced labor workers filed a petition and the litigation against Japanese companies such as Mitsubishi Heavy Industry and new Nippon Steel. Therefore, it is a civil case, not the government cases or international law cases. But our Supreme Court decision contradicts, Japan-South Korean, 1965 agreement. Therefore, Japanese government position is, okay, South Korean government should take a full responsibility for all these issues. We paid $800 million, compensation in 1965. Our government position is, we cannot do that. It's just civilian, legal case, and government cannot intervene in those cases. And then our government proposed that let the Japanese dependent firms and the South Korean firms which benefited from the Japanese compensation come up with some fund and pay those claims to the plaintiff. But Japanese government say no. You South Korean government handle everything. Therefore, is a stark contrast between Prime Minister Abe's state-centric solution versus President Moon Jae-in's victim-centered approach. President Moon's argument is this: for those plaintiffs, 1965 claims settlement accord cannot be accepted because those accords did not reflect the participation and consent of those victims. Okay? Therefore, Japan is following traditional international legal perspective. And President Moon Jae-in was following some kind of more recent international humanitarian, the legal traditions, as the case in Germany, in the Mercedes-Benz and the Siemens case, Now, more than 100 countries now have become the recipient of the reparation, not compensation, for the forced mobilization of workers during the wartime. Therefore, it is very difficult, but I hope that Japan and South Korea can come up with some wise solutions. And let us wait and see. Our prime minister went there. Japanese foreign ministry showed some negative reaction, but let us, hope that we would come up with some kind of, peaceful solution to the problem so that we can restore relations with each other.
Microphone, please. Yeah, over here, the first row. Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies not standing up because of my leg pains.
I'm sitting too.
No my name is Sang. I'm curious, how big is a domestic political issue in Korea versus all these progresses so far? Like in Taiwan, every time we have election, China policy become always a very front and center of big issues. And change of government may bring very different domestic approach towards China. Did you see any changes in Korea after election? Would there be some change of attitudes? So all this progress of the changes you mentioned about the last 3 years, with the new government, what do you think a new approach would they take?
You can say kind of deja vu of Taiwan in South Korea. It's the same thing. Therefore, in other words, inter-Korean relations, yes, some are ideologically charged. It's all politics. As Tip O'Neill says, all politics are local. Therefore, no matter how they agreed, if they can get the political gains out of their opposition to improved inter-Korean relations, then they will oppose it. Okay? And now, the leader of opposition party visited in the front line area, said that, Moon Jae-in is responsible for making South Korea as a hostage, South Korea and South Korean people as a hostage of North Korean nuclear. What kind of options could he have? Therefore, it's another. What I'm concerned is this, every become politicized, whether it's foreign policy, inter-Korean relations, or even domestic politics, everything's too politicized. Therefore, unless we come up with a new political culture to avoid the kinds of excessive politicization, we will have a real hard time in years to come. It's very sad. Our politicians are really sacrificing national interest for the sake of their own partisan gains. It's not good.
Probably same here.
Yes, the gentleman, yeah, over there. 戴帽子那位, yeah. Please identify yourself.
Okay, I'm Huang from National Taiwan Ocean University. I have two questions. The first would focus upon the triangle relationship, North Korea, United States, and Japan. North Korea's nuclear weapons, guided missiles, and the problem of kidnapping is the important source and factors of right-wing groups and progressive militarization of Japan. And these cause Japan only concern about U.S.-Japan alliance, and these cause Japan not really deeply care about Japan's Asian neighbors, except for economic considerations. But I know some scholars have different perspectives. They assert that even the unification of Korean peninsula comes true, And in the form of a liberal and capitalist system, Japan would not really change, but be more and more militarized and concerned about becoming a much stronger country. What's your perspective? And the second question, I'll speak in Chinese. 文总统虽然跟这个金正恩呢见了面，而且也有一些共识。但是我个人很好奇，就是这些共识是不是真的超越了91年以及这个2000年的一些共识？我们知道，在91年呢12月呢，这个有所谓的南北基本合意书，里面特别提到了双方要互相认同并且尊重对方的体制。那我不晓得这个是不是意含着某种的一国两制？我们知道一国两制目前在香港遭遇到极大的一些挑战啊。那另外呢，就在2000年的615有所谓615共同宣言，里面呢首先提到了这个韩半岛的所有的问题，包括统一的问题，必须由韩半岛所有的人来自主解决。这个是不是意含着美国人或者其他人呢是尽量不要介入？那他后面也提到了就南方呢提到了某种的联合制，北方提到了某种初级的联邦制。我不晓得这样子的一个体制上面的一个想法呢，目前是不是仍然在文在寅总统的考量范围之内，还是说准备把这些东西束之高阁，另起炉灶？以上两个问题，谢谢。
Those two questions are very well taken. And as the first question, let me answer to your question by citing my close friends remarks in Japan. His name is Funabashi Yoichi. You all know, he was a chief editorial writer of Asahi Shimbun. I published a book on Japan. I interviewed, 12 leading intellectuals in Japan, and Funabashi-san was one of those 12. And I asked the question to him, what would be major threat to your national security in coming 100 years? Chinese rise? He said, no. I was born in Beijing, and I was a correspondent to Beijing correspondent for 8 years. I really don't think in 100 years China never become a threat. There will be an internal fragmentation of China and etc. Then why you are so concerned? Then you don't have to alliance with the United States. And he says, unified Korea with nuclear weapons and nationalist Jill. That will be a real threat to Japan. Okay? But we do not think in that way. But Funabashi Yoichi is extremely liberal. Okay? He was chief editorial writer of Jubi, of Asahi Shimbun. And I've never expected that kind of response from such liberal as Funabashi Yoichi. But for us, we have Dr. Takeshima Ishii and whatever. For me, why we should have bad relations with neighboring countries? I strongly oppose. We should have good relations with Russia, China, and Japan. That is my view. But the Japanese perception is somewhat different. Maybe some right-wing conservatives in Japan wanted to contrive, invent external threat and enemies. And they want Korea, unified Korea being a kind of enemy of Japan. But that's a very bad idea. That being the case, then unified Korea will be a real enemy of Japan. Why they want to have an enemy? For domestic political purposes, then that's bad politics. As to your second question, when you talk about Korean unification, both North and South Korea used to want this kind of unification. North Korea want unification through the United Front strategy, like today's mainland China. They wanted to communise South Korea, okay, through United Front strategy. South Korea, many South Koreans want unification in South Korean terms, like a German model. Therefore, what North Korea wants is some kind of Vietnamese model, and South Koreans want the German model. But we all know this kind of unification will never take place. Because that kind of unification means what? One nation, okay? One Minju, okay? One nation one state, and one government, one system. Okay. But then North Korea, Kim Il-sung proposed the so-called federal and confederation approach. There is one nation, one state, two government and two systems. But we cannot accept those two systems. North Korea has a supreme leader system, okay, and we have a democratic system. North Korea is a socialist system. We have a capitalist system. We cannot accept it, okay, because the North Korean model is what? One nation, one state, two systems, and two government. Then in 1989, the North Korean government proposed the Korean Commonwealth approach to unification. Our approach is straightforward. Like the European Union, one nation, two states, two governments, and two systems. However, let us have exchange and cooperation. Let us institutionalize cooperation and integration. We call the Union of North-South Korean States. And Moon Jae-in government still support this Union of North-South Korean approaches. There is one nation, two states, two government, two systems. Yet, let us promote exchange, cooperation, integration. That is our government policy. But I think North Korea proposes so-called loose confederation. Well, confederation means what? Switzerland is confederation model, and old Czechoslovakia is confederation model. But given current heterogeneity, it will be extremely to have one state. No, I don't think so. Then we'll have exact same destiny of Yemen, 1990. In fact, that was a topic of discussion between President Kim Dae-jung and Chairman Kim Jong-il. Okay. I hope I answered your questions.
Again, this young man, third row. Okay.
안녕하십니까, 문 교수님. 저는 대만 자판대 동아시아 석사 추천입니다. I will use English now because I know the interpreter is good at English. So I have been to DPRK North Korea for twice. One time I have studied in Kim Il-sung 학교, the Kim Il-sung University for nearly a month, and another time I'm the delegation assistant of the Chinese Foreign Affairs. So I can, at that time, I was assistant, so I can meet Kim Jong-un face to face. So I agree with you in some way. I think he's a very special leader in this world. He wants to do something different with his parents, his father and his grandfather, yes. So I think nowadays, although some people said that the Korean Peninsula's relationship has entered a dilemma, but I think maybe, I don't know, but I would like to invite you to do a prediction. What is the next chance for the Korean Peninsula? So do you think who will take charge of this chance first? Who will hold this chance first? Is it want to be a very different Kim Jong-un, or nowadays have struggled in some domestic politics affairs, Moon Jae-in? So what's your opinion? 감사합니다.
Yeah, we are having a hard time right now, but everybody's having a hard time. President Trump is facing impeachment process. Our Chairman Kim Jong-un is having a lot of domestic problems, particularly growing disappointment among North Korean people about the lack of progress in negotiation with the United States, as well as lack of cooperation with South Korea. And President Moon Jae-in is also having internal and external problem. North Korea is not talking with us. Okay, United States is not listening to us. Okay, and then domestic politics is polarized. Okay, and they have all difficulties. But I have learned, very important lesson in studying international politics. I'm growingly, increasingly supporting, neo-realist, in the perspective. International structure matters, but more important thing is domestic politics. Without looking at domestic politics, you cannot explain the country's foreign behavior at all. Therefore, let me answer in that way. Therefore, international system matters, but more important thing is domestic politics. And no matter how monolithic North Korean leadership, North Korean leader cannot ignore its own citizens, people, military, party cadres, and cabinet bureaucrats. Therefore, I would say that when Kim Jong-un is coming with a policy by reflecting competing ideas and interests in North Korean society. Therefore, in order to understand what's going on in North Korea and South Korea on foreign policy, look at domestic politics. Yeah. And then you analyze external factors.
Okay, I think we will recognize one last question from the floor. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Racist San. I'm actually a PhD candidate from UCLA, USA. Actually, in my PhD program, I actually did some research about the economic development in China, especially the economic reform project. So I'm just wondering if the North Korea will have something very similar to the economic reform like China did. And I'm just wondering if the economic development, if they did, I mean, the economic reform will play an even more crucial role in, changing this political relation between North and South Korea. Could you elaborate or, give some opinion about this? Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, there is a sense of peace economy. There is a sense of, peace economy. That is what in order to really enhance exchange and cooperation and market integration, North Korea should have a market. Without having market, we cannot, have economic integration. Okay, look, go back to the early literature and economic, integration like Bella Bellasa. You start with a free trade area, customs union, common market, and then economic union and monetary union. But if North Korea continue to stick to the planned economy, we cannot do that. Okay? Therefore, we have been urging North Koreans, you're going to go through the opening reform, marketization, in order to have any meaningful interaction with South Korea. But also, North Korea wants to be a member of IMF, World Bank, and Asia Monetary Fund, even Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. But North Korea should do at least three things. First, North Korea should produce reliable and transparent economic data. That's the most important prerequisite. A second prerequisite, North Korea should come up with sweeping institutional reforms in conformity with market system. Third, North Korea should cultivate manpower who can understand and then who can run market mechanism. Therefore, North Korea needs three things. Okay? Then, without which, North Korea cannot be admitted to World Bank, IMF, and Asia Development Bank. Therefore, what we have been telling North Koreans that, look, whether you want or not, if you achieve economic prosperity, and if you want to be a normal state, you should go through those processes. And in my understanding, North Korea is more than willing to go for it. But sanctions, preventing everything. Therefore, it would be much wiser if United States uses sanction more strategically, not sanction for the sake of sanction for the sake of some substantial changes in North Korea.
Okay, I'm going to reserve the last question to myself. About the role of South Korea in cross-strait relations. Well, first of all, I think South Korea have experienced some bumpy relationship with China in the recent past. Remember the decision to install THAAD, the anti-ballistic missile system, and now United States scrapped the intermediate range nuclear weapon treaty with Russia that will free its own hand, right, to deploy land-based intermediate range missile, not just in Europe, but also in Asia Pacific. So pretty soon, I guess South Korea will be under pressure, probably from Washington, right, to this new weapon deployment. And that would definitely upset Beijing and also create a rupture between China and South Korea. And a lot of military strategists, they think that the reason why last time THAAD system, Beijing became so upset, not just for symbolic reason, but actually it compromised the THAAD system in South Korea will compromise their access denial capability on the scenario that if there's a escalation of military conflict in the Taiwan Strait, the United States, decide to intervene, and the THAAD system installed in South Korea will compromise Beijing's access denial capability, not completely, but substantially. So that lead us to another purely hypothetical question. We hope that it would never come to materialize, but I'm sure that the top policy planner in your country must have contemplated this. What if there is a military conflict in Taiwan? And then the United States, China might militarily engage with each other over Taiwan. Will the current U.S.-South Korea defense military line obligate South Korea to be, somehow involved in this conflict?
That was one of big issues during the President Noem period. All this strategic stability doctrine of Rumsfeld was challenged by President Noem, because President Noem said that we do not want to be implicated in a regional conflict which we do not want. Therefore, that the South China Sea is China Sea cross-strait relations. And because public opinion in South Korea tells, if anything happened in cross-strait, South China and East China Sea, should we intervene to support American position? 80% they say no. Public opinion say we should better to stay neutral. That is the government position, and also as to the intermediate range, possible deployment of American intermediate range ballistic missile in Korea. Mark Esper, the American Defense Secretary, did not formally raise that issue during his visit to Seoul, but it was discussed during his visit to Tokyo. And also our defense minister, when he was asked by a reporter, he categorically said that we do not have any plan to allow deployment of American intermediate range, mid-ballistic missile. And also, when we settled the THAAD issue with China in October 2017, there was an agreement on three no's. First, South Korea would no longer allow any additional THAAD deployment in Korea. Second, South Korea will not join America-led theater missile defense system. Third, South Korea will not join any US, Japan, South Korean military alliance. We committed those 3 no's, and in return, China began to lift sanctions against South Korea. Given that one, and it will be quite unthinkable for South Korea to allow American intermediate and range missile in South Korea.
Well, that comes to the end of this wonderful 2 hours stimulating deliberation and dialogue. Well, let's thank you, Professor Moon, one more time. Yeah.
Thank you for your participation. This is the end of our lectures. And tomorrow at the same place and the same time, there will be another event held by Fairwinds Foundations. And you're all welcome to come to our new events for tomorrow. Thank you.